There are few levers that are as powerful to our economy as bringing women more fully into the workforce. If the answer were easy, it would be easy, and we would have done it. I grew up in Charleston, South Carolina. It was the South, so the gender roles were pretty well established. All the young ladies knew we were going to go to college and we were going to get married young. There was a point in high school when a guidance counselor who was a kook pulled me into her office and said to me, look at your test scores, look at your SATs. You can do something. I remember at the moment, what? I really? At the time I thought, I'm going north and I'm gonna keep going. I'm gonna see how far I can take this. Oh my gosh, when I arrived at Solomon, was I in for culture shock. The entire culture was very masculine, very competitive, very testosterone-driven. There was a sense of work as an extreme combat sport. I received photocopies on my desk every morning of, how should we put it, male parts. So every day I'd come in, I'd crumple it up, I'd throw it away. The reason I stayed was I needed a job and I needed to make money. Part of it too was, hold on a second, I'm not going anywhere. I'm gonna work hard, I'm gonna let my work speak for myself, and I'm gonna make it here. I'm gonna make it. The unwritten rule was you do not write negative research. Well, no one sent me that memo. So I wrote a negative piece of research on a company, and a month after that, they imploded, and I was right. I got a call from Sandy Weil, who was the CEO of Citigroup. He says, I'd like you to come over and run the research business for me. And I said, Sandy, I've got the best research business here. Appreciate it. No thanks. And he said, how about if you run Smith Barney too? Okay, sure, I'll run Smith Barney. I, on a Tuesday, had responsibility for 386 people. On a Wednesday, 30,000 people. The financial crisis was terrifying. I went to the CEO at the time. I said, look, this is unconventional, but I think we should share some of this pain with clients. He said no. We eventually did partially reimburse clients for it, and then I was sent home. All the research shows that women are very relationship focused. And for me, it wasn't a transaction. It was really about the relationship. That's very female. And so, did I lose my job because I'm female? There's something there, I think now. And it's counterintuitive because you would have thought that those who had driven the industry into the downturn would have been the losers, but that's not what happened. When I looked at this and said, hold on a second, getting women to the top matters. Networking is the difference in mid-level careers for those who get ahead and those who don't. If there's a tool through which I can help with this, I can drive a business that delivers networking and delivers education, I'm in. Let's do it. I think the industry needs more women. And as I've looked around for things that matter, this matters. This matters.
Sallie Krawcheck, welcome to AOL Build.
Nancy, good to be here. Thank you.
Well, we were so excited to launch your Makers piece this week. We actually did that interview for a film from our documentary series, Makers, Women in Business, which we featured your rise to become the most powerful woman on Wall Street. And, you know, the book is fabulous. It's a book for all women in the workforce, for girls coming out of college. I think it's incredibly useful for women of my generation. What was the impetus around writing this book and this particular message at this moment in time?
Well, first of all, let me congratulate y'all and thank y'all for the Makers series, because I was telling you when we were backstage, I saw the Women in Business one in a hotel room by myself one evening, and seeing the women who had come before me just brought me to tears. It's so moving, and it's such an important gift that y'all have given to society and to young women and men everywhere. So really, thank you for all you do. Yay, come on, guys.
Thanks. That film is available on makers.com, free, so you can watch that.
So anyway, my book, Own It, The Power of Women at Work, is also a bit of an effort to give back a little bit. And I found there's lots of advice for women and young women out there right now, and I find so much of it falls into sort of a category, right? And the category is, you know, I started out and I wasn't that successful, and I sort of searched for a while, and then I became super successful, and here's how, right? And mine, of course, is I started out, I wasn't that successful, I became successful, I got fired, I became successful again, I got fired, I picked myself up, I got back, you know, and so I tried to give a very realistic, pretty raw perspective of what business is not only like today for women, but is going to be increasingly like, given how rapidly things are changing. And the other thing I wanted to get across is that, again, so much of the advice for women essentially boils down to act like the boss, act like the man, and really bring out those masculine characteristics, which is fine, except one, it doesn't particularly work, doesn't help businesses get better, it's exhausting, and it causes a number of women to drop out of the workforce. And by the way, women bring such great characteristics to work. We make businesses better by being ourselves.
And that's something you talked about in the Makers piece in your book, was your exit from Citi was really intrinsically tied to you being female and the qualities that you brought to the table as a woman in the boys' club of Wall Street and your, you know, essentially all male colleagues. And now you're positing in the book that these same skills or traits that you call them are actually the key to a woman's success and power in the workforce. Can you talk a little bit about those traits?
So the Citi story, for those who, bless your heart, are not familiar, is that I think was the only Wall Street executive who returned client money in the downturn. That we had sold products to our clients which we thought were low risk and should have gone down 8 cents on the dollar in a bad market, and went down, you know, like 100 cents on the dollar. And I went to my boss and said, we should partially reimburse these clients. And he said no, and I said yes, and he said no. And I went back and forth to the board, who sided with me. And so we partially reimbursed clients, and then he fired me. And for years, Nancy, if you had said to me, did he fire you because you were a woman, I would have gotten I would have sat up straighter, I would have looked at you sternly, I would have said absolutely not, and how dare you, and why is everything about gender, for God's sake? But now I think it was. I totally changed my mind. And the reason I changed my mind is because as I did the research on the things we women, on average, not every woman, not every time, but as we women on average bring to the workforce, it is a focus on clients. It's a drive for meaning and purpose. It's a risk awareness. It's a long-term orientation. It's a lot of the things that I was feeling. I couldn't sleep at night because I thought we didn't mean to, but we did wrong for these clients. And the research would tell us that relationship focus is very female, and it can be a real positive in business.
Okay, so using that, how might the crash of 2008 might have played out differently had we known then what we know now?
First of all, I don't know that we've learned the lessons, all the lessons of the crash of 07, 08. And you and I and everyone here, we know intuitively, if you picture those trading floors on Wall Street, sea of middle-aged white guys, sea of young and middle-aged white guys. And I should pause, and I always like to pause and say, I love middle-aged white guys. I've been married to a couple of them. I think they are amazing, amazing individuals. But we already intuitively know if there were more people of difference, if there were more women, if there were more people of color, there were more people of different nationalities, that the crisis wouldn't have been as bad. And the research indicates to us that homogenous groups tend to overtrust each other, that homogenous markets tend to be mispriced by, on average, about 58%, which is about what the markets went down. And so it becomes much more about, I can finish that sentence for you, I trust you, rather than, hold on, let's go through that thinking better. Now, the challenge with this, Nancy, is that we went into the crisis with Wall Street as white, male, and middle-aged, and we've come out whiter, maler, and middle-ageder. So I'm not sure we've learned some of the important lessons about groupthink, which was a cause of the crisis, and how to break it.
Well, I think we can agree we've all come a long way as women in the workforce. In the last 45, 50 years, we talk about that a lot at Makers, and we're at kind of an inflection point. You've talked about the end of the 1980s work culture, and I think you and I agree. Anytime we end something from the 1980s, it's a very good thing. It's relief. But specifically, the way women sought to act like men in order to get ahead, in order to succeed. And that worked for a couple of decades, but it seems to have plateaued, as evidenced by the numbers of women at the top kind of stagnating. What does the new culture of the 21st century workforce look like, and what are companies going to need to understand and to do to be competitive and to attract the best talent?
Yeah, so first of all, the 1980s, I recently moved, and not only were we told to act like men, we sort of dressed like them. I found my briefcase. I'm like, I carried a briefcase to work in the 1980s, but dang it if I didn't have a briefcase. You know why it's easier to tell everybody to act the same? Because it's easier. It's easier as a manager to evaluate people who are different on one standard, that of the CEO, and tell them to be more confident. Raise your hand for the job even if you're not fully prepared. Hey, if you're an introvert, you become an extrovert, because then I can manage everybody the same. The issue with that is the power of diversity is diversity. The power of diversity is not bringing in people of difference and then telling them to act like the CEO. And you see it, companies that have more diversity have higher returns, lower risk, greater innovation. By allowing people to be their selves, their true selves, their comfortable selves, that's where innovation comes in, because people can argue and clash. And so the smart companies will tell not the women or the people of difference, work harder, act like a guy, but you know what, managers? You work harder. You work harder and draw out the best in people no matter where they are.
And what happens in the decision-making process? You've talked about, it might feel like it's going better when it's homogenized, but it's not better. Can you talk?
It's the false comfort of agreement. And I saw this. Hey, we've got 10 people, all of whom are just like me, and we all agree. Done. Gosh, nothing bad can happen. Well, but if they're all like you, you just had one opinion. You didn't have that diversity of background and perspective. So it's actually when there's more disagreement and more debate, which may not be a fun way sometimes to spend the day, that you're actually safer and that you're actually making better decisions and therefore getting better results.
So let's pivot a little to something you are passionate about and working on. One of the things you talk about in your book is that women are loath to speak about money. As you put it, we're well within our comfort zone to talk about the travails of our in vitro fertilization treatments and the resulting negative impact on our sex life, but we draw the line when it comes to talking about money. Why? And why do we need to get over it?
And particularly, by the way, I'm not going to poll the audience, but most people get naked with their significant other, like physically naked, before they get financially naked. Right? We're more, right? Everybody's like, yeah, that actually happened to me. That totally happened. Money is this source of our hopes and our dreams and our wishes, and it's about shame, and it's everything, right? It's all this emotion. The challenge for us as women is that we don't have as much money as the guys do. We have a lot of money. We have $5 trillion of investable assets. We direct 80% of consumer spending. We're half the workforce. We have tremendous power. But on a person-by-person basis, we do not have as much money as the typical man does. We retire with 2/3 the money of men, which is really a challenge because we also live 6-8 years longer. And I would make the statement, and I would make it strongly as we sit here on International Women's Day, with gender pay parity 150, 60, 70 years off, more for women of color, right? I would put forth that we women will not be equal with men until we are financially equal with men. And so my life work right now is, I've got a biography that has a whole bunch of long words in it, but really it's to get more money to women. That's what I'm trying to do. Because when we do, we can live fuller lives. We can tell the jerk boss to take this job and shove it and start our own business. We can tell the jerk boyfriend or girlfriend that we're leaving, right? We can live much greater lives, particularly in a capitalist society, when we have that financial equality.
And you started this awesome company called Ellevest.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that. What do you offer that's
So
different?
Ellevest is a digital investment platform for women. So it's investing for women. And I want to be perfectly clear. If you had come to me, Nancy, 3 years ago and said, Sallie, I have an idea for you. You should really start this investing business for women. I would have said, Nancy, you should jump off a cliff and like never come back, because that's a terrible idea. You know, and then I would have gotten my back up and I would have said, what do you think we women need something different? What do you think our lady brains can't handle the big man numbers? And I've totally changed my mind. I've totally changed my mind because of that gender investing gap. And so I looked and said, isn't that interesting? Wall Street, the investing industry that we just talked about as being so male, does a much better job for men than for women. And it costs the women sitting here today hundreds of thousands, for some women, millions of dollars over their lives because we don't invest as much as the men do. And as I began to think, and we take the blame. We're like, it's my fault. You know, I'm just not as good at math as the guys are. That's not true. Girls are as good or better. It's just that, you know, I'm not as good an investor. Actually, that's not true. When women invest, they're better investors than men.
Why?
Because we take because we don't get emotional. Truth be told, right? Men tend to trade more, fall in love with their winners, take action in downturns, and women tend to set it and leave it. And therefore, don't make the moves at the wrong time emotionally and don't pay as much in fees. We tell ourselves we need more financial education to invest, which sounds right, except that men need financial education too, but they do. And then it struck me, the industry gives us these signals. And then the industry, 86% male, talks in war and sports analogies, beat the market, outperform, pick a winner. And the industry symbol is a phallic symbol. It is a bull, right? Not a single woman has ever looked and said, you know, I just look at that bull, it speaks to me. You know, I just see it, I'm like, I have to invest. And so the signal we get from the industry is this is not for us. And by the way, then you have to have $250,000 to invest with this guy. So I said, you know what? We're going to go out. We're going to do something that has no minimum. We're going to, very importantly, take into account the fact women live longer than men. Very important when you're investing for retirement. That women's salaries peak sooner than men's do. Very frustrating, but very important. And we're going to spend hundreds of hours with women and ask them how they want to invest. Guess what? They don't care. We don't care about beating the market. What we care about is, I want to retire well, or buy a home, or have a child, or I want to build wealth. I want to build wealth, but it's not about winning. It's about achieving what I want to in life.
That's awesome. They did put a girl down on Wall Street today next to the bull.
Yeah, a little girl.
Yeah, so maybe they get that. Yeah. As you say, it's the fourth wave of feminism.
Yeah.
Speaking of the F word, which we talk about a lot at Makers, that's not an expletive, that is feminism. You're a self-described feminist, but you eschew this whole notion of empowerment. You know, you'd like to adios that term from the lexicon of feminism. Why?
Well, I looked up the definition. And so for years, I just didn't like the word, and I thought maybe it was because, you know how people overuse the word authentic? And then you're like, quit using that word. And then I thought empowerment was the same. It was just overused. And then a friend said it, we looked it up, and it means to be given power. And so within that word is a slight sense of passivity, that I must be empowered. I need somebody to give me power. When in fact, we women, as mentioned, as a group, have got a tremendous amount of power. I mean, if any of you saw that women's march, that was power. But think again about we direct 80% of consumer spending. I think Uber today after what their alleged revelations about what's going on there and the way they treat women, are probably beginning to understand the impact of the women's pocketbook, right? And what's fascinating now is that we've had these resources for a while, but we really didn't have the means to communicate with each other about it and to rally around. I mean, the Women's March would have been more difficult to pull together pre-social media, right? So all of a sudden, we've got the power, and we're really beginning to have the means to rally around and use it.
Well, in terms of women moving forward in the workforce, you've talked about paid parental leave, which we agree is mission critical, and something that gets bipartisan support. If you were on a task force or leading a task force, because you would be leading it, to get this done, to pass a bill or to get something done on this, what's the argument that you make for people who don't understand how important paid parental leave is? And what do companies, why is this a win-win for businesses and the economy?
That's the argument. It's a win-win. So here's where we think about this incorrectly. The way we think about it is it's an expense. And we're going to have to pay for her and, that mom and that baby, and they're going to be taking. The truth is, the recent research has demonstrated that it's an investment. And this pays for itself in the first year. Why? Because if we don't, as a mother, if we don't give women this time off and they're cobbling together their sick leave and, a day off and have to go back too quickly, they are more likely, indeed much more likely, to fall out of the workforce. That company then needs to replace her, and that company needs to train her replacement, both of which are very expensive before you even get to the work that doesn't get done, during that period of replacement and that isn't getting done to as high a level during the period of training. It pays for itself in the first year. And even more, one of the great untapped resources of this country and the world are women who are not involved in the economy. And so by then, over time, keeping women in the economy, they're earning, they're spending, they're investing, they're saving for retirement. I mean, this thing is such a win-win-win. Even on a second-order level, they're demonstrating to their daughters, them being in the workforce, and their daughters, therefore, are likely to earn more when they become older. I mean, I don't know of anything that's more positive than this. And yes, it will take an investment that pays off for itself in the first year. Like, nothing pays for itself in the first year. This is,
No brainer.
Was that okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
So then on the subject of parenthood, you had to navigate this work-life balance thing that we talk about a lot with a high-octane career. You've got a couple of kids. You've got a marriage. From the outside, it looks like you've been pretty successful. But what did it feel like when you were really in the thick of it, that sort of decade between 7 and 17, when it's on with the kids and everything?
Oh. 7's easy. She and I were talking backstage, and her kids are 13, 11.
15, 11, yeah.
Well, wait for 16 and 17, because everybody says, oh, the baby years are hard, and they are. But 16, 17, nobody warns you. So I don't know if I'm allowed to say this on live.
Say whatever you want.
Yeah, so I was actually asked to give sort of my top career advice over the weekend, and number 2 on the top career advice is don't marry a dick. Thank you. It really is amazingly good career advice. Because,
Why?
Because it takes at least 2. And if you see in these marriages, it's just one of them fighting this battle. And sometimes you need man-to-man defense. Sometimes you need zone defense. I mean, you got to play it all different ways. But
so you got it right with number 2.
I got it right with number 2.
What did you do? Did you talk about it in advance? What do people need? What's the advice?
Absolutely. So, the smartest thing I did when our children were born was I convinced him that when the toddler screamed mommy in the middle of the night, he actually meant parent of either gender. And so we took turns. And Tuesday night was my night, and if Jonathan woke up 37 times, that was my problem, and Wednesday night was his night, and if Kitty woke up, not at all, then he won. And so we really sort of traded off. On the weekends, I got to sleep in on Saturday, he got to sleep in on Sunday. But here's the most important thing I did, which I got completely over the work-life balance issue. This whole, do I have it perfect? Do I have it all? I set a standard very quickly with my children and my family, which is I'm a mediocre mother on my best day. Like, that is absolutely as high as I can go. And that if everybody's eating,
Everybody's healthy enough.
No one's dead.
You know, I mean, the clothes are only semi-clean is fine, right? No bones are broken. That's okay. You know, I don't have to be perfect because I really didn't want to even model that for my children because I don't know that that is the most important thing. I thought the most important thing was, hey, moms out there, dads out there, they've got these jobs that they love, and most importantly, where they're making a difference. And that 15 minutes late for the school play is not the end of the world and not worth tears. Because think about how fortunate we are that we even get to have this discussion. But what's important is, what is mom out there doing, right? And so every big business decision I made, believe it or not, I would, should I return client money or not? I'm gonna get fired if I do. Should I do it or not? I don't know, I like my job. Came down to, what would my children think? If my kids were sitting here beside me, what decision would I want them to see me make? And it made it, Nancy, crystal clear almost every time.
And you have a statistic in your book that in terms of their future earning potential, there's a huge impact to seeing you work.
If when they see their mom working, the daughter then has that confidence to go out and work herself and earn herself. So look, these are all personal choices, and the choice I make won't be the right choice for you or you or you. We have to be really kind to each other about these things. I think, speaking of the 80s, there used to be too much of a sense of, what did your choice say about my choice? And if what you were doing was and too much then in the office of the queen bee thing, where senior women wouldn't help junior women be successful. We just need to get rid of that beep. Shit. That's stuff, because it's not helpful to anybody.
Okay, one more question before we throw it out to some Q&A. I have to just admire the way you have handled setbacks in your career. Another F word, failure, which is, I think, a lot worse than feminism. But what's your coping strategy, and what do you say to people who go up in their career and then fall down and what feels like...
So I hadn't bragged because we didn't know each other well enough yet, but now we do, that I hold a world record. Which is pretty awesome. And I am the only woman to be fired on the front page of the Wall Street Journal twice. So that's amazing, right? And so it doesn't get any more public failure than that. And the research tells us that we women and girls actually take failure much harder than men do. And that boys tend to, when they fail, and you can see this with your kids, when boys fail, you know, it was this outside thing. I didn't study enough hard for the test, so it wasn't my fault, or the wind was in my face. And females, oh, it's my fault. Oh, I'm so embarrassed. Oh, I'm so ashamed. And part of the reason I talk about getting fired so vocally, one, because I can't hide from it, because it was on the journal, but two, because there's no shame to it. And that really nobody cares as much as you do. And pick yourself up and dust yourself off, and you learn everything you can from it and get back to it. And really the underpinning for it is an underlying recognition of how really fortunate we are. That even those days when, when I got fired, I go home, I drink heavily, obviously, like really heavily.
What do you drink?
Anything that has alcohol in it. I try to avoid alcohol-free refreshments during that period. I like to have an official day, really a global day of self-pity for Sallie. The whole day, no showering, in a puddle, continuing to drink. And then the next day, I like to pull every bit of learning that I can out of it. Call people, what could I have done better, et cetera, from there. But underlying it is a recognition, and this sort of gets me emotional to say, is a recognition that I have been so fortunate in my life. My circle of friends have been so fortunate that our worst day is better than so many people's best day. And that when you actually set it there and recognize how truly lucky and fortunate we are, then it's like, all right, it's just failure. Next.
Thank you. All right, let's open it up for some Q&A.
Hello, hi Sally. My name is Jasmine. It's an honor speaking to you. I started a business book club this year, and we read Mind the Gap, so that's how I became familiar with Ellevest. Yes. So my question, I have two. The first one is, how much should I be contributed to my savings and investment accounts? Like what percentage? Yes. And the second one is, I want to be a serial entrepreneur. So what kind of advice or tips do you give for someone in my position?
Okay, so the first one is get ready to fail. When you're a serial entrepreneur, failure is just another step on the way to success. Have an idea that you're passionate about, because being an entrepreneur, I like to say, because it's true, is harder than running Merrill Lynch. I'm the only person on the planet who can say that. But honestly, starting a business is harder than running I have found, big, complex business. So you better love it. And get used to making decisions on imperfect information. Because you won't ever have the perfect information, but you'll have to switch and change your business based on what the customers and clients are telling you. So that's number one. Now, number two, on investing and so on. So I'm glad you read Mind the Gap. So for those of our viewers and those here, it is an e-book on the Ellevest website, Ellevest. For all of the women here and who are watching, you have a homework assignment. I want you to go to the site and either go to the resource center or type in Ellevest Mind the Gap. And what we do in this ebook is we have quantified and described and hopefully provided resources and solutions for the 7 gender money gaps women face. Now let me see if I can get them. The gender work gap, the gender pay gap, the gender work achievement gap, the gender investing gap, the gender debt gap. We have one of those. The gender expense gap, the gender unpaid labor gap, and the gender business funding gap. And we go through and say, on average, these cost women millions of dollars. And here are some resources. For example, when I used to go and ask for a raise when I was younger, I didn't know what to ask for. So I'd go in and ask for a raise, and I'd get one or I wouldn't. We've given you resources like Get Raised or Payscale.com or Comparably that will kind of sort of tell you how much you should make. So you can go in with that information. What everyone has to do before they invest, so take a look at that. How do I save and invest? Before you pass go, before you collect $200, you got to pay off your credit card debt. That stuff, high interest rate, saps away at your, soul. And if you can't afford to buy something without putting on a credit card, I don't want you to buy it. The next thing is, if you have high interest rate debt, such as 7%, 6% student loan debt, I want you to start getting that paid off as well. I want you to build an emergency fund of cash, 1 month, 3 month, even more, take-home pay or expenses, so that if something happens, particularly as an entrepreneur, you've got something to fall back on. If you have a 401k at your company, and particularly one with a match, then you begin investing there and put a % of every paycheck. After that, you begin investing with an Ellevest. The way you should think about, in general, your salary is that about 50% of it, 50% of your take-home pay goes to needs, 30% for fun, go have a blast, and 20% for your long-term savings and investing, including retirement or buying a house or starting a business. And you want to invest out of every paycheck. It makes it a habit, you forget it's even there, and it also helps you, I believe, weather the ups and downs of the markets. If you're getting, what if I invest and the market goes down? Well, then you'll be investing next week when the market's down, which is awesome, right? And you really want to start this as soon as you can. That dollar you invest in your 20s is worth so much more on average than the dollar you invest in your 50s or 60s, because you give it the chance to grow. And we tend to underestimate the impact of compounding, that ability to grow, which Albert Einstein is rumored to have called the 8th wonder of the world. So it looks like you've got it together, which is pretty amazing. Thank you.
Hi, so good to meet you. So I really loved what you said earlier about the language people use when they talk about words like empowerment and feminism. And something that I've noticed, especially over the last year, is that a lot of women hesitate to call themselves feminists because they kind of don't understand the word. What would you say to a woman, either young or old, that says that they're not a feminist, but they still believe in equality?
Oh, come on, then you don't understand what feminism means, right? I mean, it is about having equality of opportunity, political equality, et cetera. It means that they need to pick up the dictionary and look at it. But I get it. I really get it. When I was in my 20s, I would not have, if you'd said, are you a feminist, Sally, I probably would have said, well, okay, sure, but it wasn't forward for me. And part of the reason was I sort of thought the fight was over. And Gloria Steinem has said that women are the only group that become more radical as they age, and it happened to me. So I got to Wall Street. I'm in my 20s. I look around, and there are plenty of other women. It wasn't 50-50, but there were plenty of us, and everybody seemed to be perfectly happy to have me around. My mother had been a feminist. I didn't want to do anything like her, so I'm not a feminist, and it's over, right? It was her fight. Women shaved their armpits, let's go on, right? And so then I get into my 30s, and I'm in a fugue state. I've got little kids. I'm trying to be a passably okay wife. I'm trying to make it up, climb up the ladder at work. And your 30s pass in a fugue state. And then all of a sudden you get into your 40s, mid-40s, and you look around, and there are no women left at work with you. And you say, son of a gun, we haven't made as much progress as I thought. And in fact, this is what we're seeing for all the amazing conversation and discussion and debate we've had around the advancement of women over the past few years. Our progress has stalled. And as mentioned, we are 100, 150 years away, depending on the study, depending on the area of the world, from gender pay equality, decades away from equality of managers or boards, et cetera. And that's when women then tend to become feminist and fight the battle. Here's what I think can be different. Here's what I think is different, is that women in their 20s now are saying, wait a minute, this isn't over. That because of the election, which was an eye-opener, because they're recognizing that our progress in business is stalled, it's an eye-opener. Women are increasingly saying, whether I even call myself that or not, the battle is not over. What I'm really optimistic about in business is that before, a company, if they didn't advance women, maybe they'd get higher returns if they did, but that's sort of theoretical. Today, we can leave them, right? We can not buy from them, and we can leave them, and we can start our own things. We didn't have as many options before, and I think going forward, companies that don't pay attention to us and that don't treat us well are actually going to see more of a blowback than they have in the past.
Hi, Sally. I am Marissa, and you have been so inspiring in what you've accomplished and what you've achieved. And I'm really curious, as a woman in her prime earning years, can you give a great negotiating bit of advice?
Yeah.
And also your thoughts on having it all, what that looks like now versus what it looked like in the past?
Yeah, nobody has it all. Don't worry about it. Right? You have to go for what's important to you, and that's why what was important to me was not being the very best mom who made the very best dinner every night. Although I make such a heck of a pie crust, I can't even begin to brag about this. The secret, of course, is vodka. Both in the pie crust as well as drinking it while you're making the pie crust, and then you don't care if it's not that good. So here's the challenge with women negotiating, which is that for all everybody tells us to act like a man, guess what happens if we do sometimes? We get blowback from it. It's really interesting because while we talk about women as being the more emotional gender, we get punished at work if we're too feminine or we're too masculine. And men are actually allowed a broader emotional range at work. I mean, think about Wall Street. The guy breaks the phone, nobody thinks anything of it. Oh, there they are. A woman does it, we're talking about it for 20 years, okay? So in negotiating, my best advice is do not start the day you walk in to ask for the raise because it's way too late. You gotta start 6 months before, 1 year before, but months before. And you need to go into your boss's office. You need to go have read the Ellevest Mind the Gap ebook. So you've gone to different resources. You have a good idea of what your job should pay. You have a good idea of what kind of increase it should be. And you walk in and you say to your boss, look, let's sort of problem solve together. This is how much I should be making. I want to make even more. So what metrics can we talk about for me this year that would have you pay me this much? Is it number of clients? Is it KPIs? Is it client satisfaction? Is it number of projects? The more you can quantify, the better, because then it takes all the gendered stuff out of it and you've got something to really look at. You want to find out what is on his mind. What is his biggest problem? What is the company's biggest problem? Can you help them solve their most important problem? And then check in through the course of the year. Look, we talked about 5 new clients and I'm up to 3, right? Remember that. On the day of the negotiation, you walk in, you've of course beat your plan, right? So hopefully there's no discussion. Sometimes, however, they'll come in short, right? The company's having a tough year, et cetera, et cetera. You need to walk in with 12 other asks. So, you know, we talk about it so much, you get the raise or you don't. You cannot walk out of there without a yes. And so as soon as he says, well, we really didn't get the bonus pool and blah, 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 you come back with, well, then can you pay for me to go to a coding class? Can you give me time off to go to the coding class? Can you give me a stint in the marketing department? Can you give me a stint in Paris? Can you have me mentored by the new hotshot? Can I work from home on Fridays? Whatever those things are that are of value to you, that can make you a better professional, that can turn into money later. Sometimes they're more valuable than money on that day. And by doing it, he or she gets used to saying yes to you, because then you're like, you're the best, you're amazing. And he's like, that felt so good, I'm gonna say yes more. And you get in that habit. But I would definitely put on that mindset of we're problem solving together, because the better professional you are, the better off he or she is, and the more they'll want to pay you.
Thank you for the question. And thank you, Sallie Krawcheck, for joining us today at AOL Build. We hope you'll come back. It was really wonderful to have you.
Thank you.
Thank you.